Well, good morning, everybody. It's the largest attendance I've ever had in any of our licensing meetings in the last 4 years. But anyway, welcome to you all. This is the licensing subcommittee just looking at just one agenda item. May I just initially introduce who we all are. My name's Jerome Davidson, and my fellow councillor on the committee is Patricia Ellis. And I'm supported by Kimberly Clark, who will be
who's the clerk?
Kimberly Clark, who will be clerking the meeting. We have Mr. Hughes, who will be representing the licensing officers, and Ian Hunt, who is standing in for our normal Gillian legal advisor. But I'm sure he'll do an absolutely excellent job. In terms of the parties who are here, we've got representations from both the residents, which seems to be on my right, and from the applicant, who I think is on our left. Now, in terms of the operation, oh, yes, we've got to follow a process. Although I started speaking as the chairman, I need to be elected as the chairman. Now, we're only a group of two today, this morning. One of our committee members unfortunately was not able to attend, but we are for it. So this is a formal process. And I believe my fellow councillor has pointed the finger at myself, so I will continue as chair. Now, in terms of the process, if anybody wants to speak, please do put up your hand. And if you're new to this chamber, there's a little button in front of you which will show a red light, which will turn your speaker on. And when you're not speaking, do turn it off, otherwise it confuses the whole process. Now, to start off, if I may, Mr. Hughes, would you outline what we are discussing today?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in front of you an application for a new premises licence for the brewery and tap room, Pierpont Farm, Reeds Road, Frensham Farnham, which has received 49 valid representations, 23 in opposition and 26 in support. There have been no representations received from responsible authorities. In brief, the application seeks to license the premise for sale of alcohol both on and off the premises, Monday to Thursday, 12 till 2300 hours, Friday and Saturday, 12 till midnight, and Sunday 12 till 22:30. Opening hours are the same as the last sale of alcohol, but opening at 10 AM in the morning, termination the same. Officers request you consider the application.
Do you have any specific questions?
Not of this.
Any questions directly from the applicant? From the members of Frensham?
On the process of the meeting.
Yes, not on the actual. Yes.
Okay. We've got a process request, Chair.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, please go ahead.
Good morning. Could I please ask you to define the premises for this licence application for the Farnham Brewing Company?
In terms of defining the process is...
No, the premises, sorry, the premises. The premises.
The premises.
I'm trying to understand your question, to be honest. Are you talking about what a premises licence is?
No, I'm talking about the actual premises that they're...
What, to describe the premises?
Yeah, how they've been
I think
described.
that would probably be best done when the applicant lays out their
Thank you.
application. He can explain what type of premises it is and how they're going to run it and manage it.
Thank you.
And I would add, because we are looking at premises, that this is a licensing and not a planning application that we are considering. And I know that there is a possibility of the two being intertwined, but can we keep them in our minds as being quite separate? This is a licensing rather than a planning application. Now, the applicant, would you like to describe exactly what you're going to be applying for? And I'm sure you've probably read a lot of the objections, but if you could address some of those as well.
Thank you. Is that better? So Marcus Lavelle, licensing advisor for the applicant. And the members, can I just check so that the members have received this document? And can I just ask if people making representations have also been provided with a copy of the document? So,
Those documents are all online, and I'm sure they would have been perused in detail to be able to find the necessary grounding for their objections or their support.
thank you, sir. The members will see at pages 4 and 5 brief introductions for the applicant team. And moving on my left, we have Dave, Ilka, Andy. If I could just ask them just briefly to introduce themselves to you, sir, by way of background.
Hello, I'm David Bevan. I've lived in Farnham for around 10 years. I live on Latchford Lane. I often frequented the farm over the years I've been there. I am in the pub and bar industry, which I've been in for all my life. I own a bar and a pub in London. They're both craft beer pubs. That's what I do for a living, and opening a brew has always been my ambition. And when the farm was becoming vacant from the previous business that had been there for 5 years, I mean, I got together with my friends who also live locally, and we decided to give it a go and asked the landlord if we could take it on, and they agreed. And that's where we are now. Unfortunately, the premises was licensed before, but the previous tenant handed it in, voided it. I don't know however it works. So here we are today, reapplying for another premises license on the same site. We're just about to start brewing beer this week in the brewery part of the little farm units. Route to market, obviously I have pubs that I'd like to supply. I'd like to supply local pubs and local events. And the main part of the business is also the tap room, which is there on site. It's been used for the last, I don't know, 5-6 years. No issues as far as I can see. It was a great asset to the community. It's a shame it's gone, but I'm hopefully trying to reopen it and keep it going and let people try our great beer that we're going to be brewing there. Yeah.
I'm Ilkka Marttikainen. I've lived in Farnham for 15 years and the last 8 years in Lower Bourne, so about 7 minutes away from the farm. And I've also been a tenant of the farm with my other business for over 2 years now, so I know pretty much everyone on the farm. And yeah, like David said, we hope to recreate the community hub that was there before.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. I'm Andrew Muggeridge. I'm also another local resident in Lower Bourne. Met Dave and Ilka when our kids were at the infant school there, and did a lot of mountain biking through the area. And just, you know, myself and my wife and family are quite involved in a lot of the community events, like the local Bourne show and the school events and so on. And just really looking forward to working on something local and different with my friends.
Mr. Stewart, will you put your case before us then?
Just a little bit more from me, sir, but hopefully not too much. You have in front of you a number of documents that set things out, and I don't want to spend my time reading those aloud to you. No doubt your licensing panel, you have had plenty of time to read these and you know what you're looking at. Everybody else hopefully has had plenty of time to look at them and they may have questions. And a large amount of what we're here to do today is probably to address those questions, and that's no doubt an effective use of our time. I would like to just cover off.
Excuse me, Chairman,
things.
I'm very sorry to interrupt on a point of order. My name is David Munro. As you're aware, I am one of the local councillors, but I'm speaking as a local resident. Just asking my colleagues here, many of us have not actually seen this. I wonder, therefore, if this could be gone through in a bit more detail so that residents who object have a chance actually to refer to this document and make any comments from their local knowledge that they see fit.
Point taken. I thought it had all been published.
No, I was just asked to send it to them.
Okay, I do apologize, Councillor Munro. I hadn't appreciated that had not been fully circulated.
Do
Could we have just a
recess.
5-minute recess and other copies can be made and sent around?
So I was about to ask exactly that. It may
Yeah,
indeed.
could we
move things
just
along.
wait for 5 minutes? Can we get a copies made, do you think? Thank you very much, Kimberly. Are we restarted? Mr. Sewell, I guess you'll be taking us through some of what's in this additional document. So I'll let you continue on with your proposal, if I may.
Thank you, sir. As I said, I don't intend to read from it verbatim. You've had time to read it. Those making representations have now had a chance to peruse it. I would only take a chance to address just one initial question we heard from those making representations. Does that help? Okay. I'll take this opportunity to address one of the questions that one of those making representations asked. That was the extent of the premises. You've heard effectively that this is it's a microcraft brewery with tap room. At page 25 of the committee papers, that's not this extra bundle, so that's the original committee papers that hopefully you have a copy of. And I think your officer can actually turn this page up on the screen for the benefit of everybody. Thank you. Could we go to the one above? Yes, the one before, please. Thank you. Oh. Could you zoom out a little just so we can see the whole thing? That would be helpful. Thank you. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. And here we can see, so as required by the Licensing Act, we have effectively two buildings joined by a small extension that I understand was added at some time historically. At the top of the plan, you'll see there's the tap room, red line around there. There are WCs between that and the brewery. Both are redlined, both are to be part of the licensed premises. And you'll note there's an area identified as outside seating. And at the top of the page, you can see where that outside seating area falls in the box out area location. So for the purpose of the Licensing Act, the licensed premises would be the red line areas. And there's an area identified for external consumption. And this is an application for both on and off sales, sir. So that's sales within the red line for consumption in the red line, and within the red line for consumption anywhere outside of that. And it's that off sales that would facilitate people using, for want of a better word, a beer garden outside, sir. I'm hoping that addresses the question.
Sorry, can you just repeat that last bit, please?
The bit about the licensed premises?
With regard to off license, the last point that you made.
This is an application, sir, for alcohol sales for consumption both on and off of the premises. So that includes sales within the red line that are made for consumption within the red line. It also includes sales made within the red line for consumption outside of the red line. And as you can see, there's an area identified for outside seating, the way in which people would be able to enjoy alcohol in that outside seating area would be by making sales that count as being made within the red line, and they'd effectively be consuming off. That's also the same permission that's required if you want to have sales for people to take home or to deliver to people's homes.
Where does that area stop? It's not defined.
In the box out at the top, you can see the extent of the external seating area.
What I'm saying is with a normal application, you have, for example, buildings J and K that we're talking about today has a very defined curtilage. In planning, it has a curtilage. You haven't shown that curtilage, therefore where does the drinking area stop?
I believe your officer wishes to make a comment, so I'll hold on.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'll just explain on sales and off sales. As the gentleman said, on sales are for the consumption of alcohol on the premises, which is within the red marked area. Off sales for outside, that's what Sainsbury's have. They're allowed to sell alcohol for consumption off the premises. It isn't within 1 mile of Sainsbury's or 2 miles within Sainsbury's, it's anywhere. So you take it home and drink it, you take it to the park and drink it. It's anywhere.
The question, what I'm trying to get to is, are we saying that if you purchase alcohol within the red line, within the licensed area, that you can drink it anywhere on the site because it's shown? And actually, sorry, I didn't want to go on to this now, but that's a conversation that we've had, Paul, where an area, if it's shown on the plan, can be used for the consumption of alcohol. Now, the plan here shows the entire site, all of it. It doesn't show separately the defined area for buildings J and K. Buildings J and K have their own, it's like making a licensing application for a pub, but then showing everybody's kind of around it. It hasn't got a cutoff. That's the point.
It does, because the cutoff is the building itself. For sales on, for sales off, it's the whole point. It's like when you go to Sainsbury's and buy alcohol, or if you're in a restaurant and you buy a bottle of wine and you want to you only drink half of it, you want to take the other half home, unless they've got off sales, you can't take it home because you can only consume it there. So you take it home. So there is no set defined area but the building their license,
yes,
their licensing is the 2 red squared areas.
I understand. What I'm saying is that by granting a license where the whole plan is shown, that means that alcohol can be consumed in every single building on that site when sold from there. Is that what we're saying?
It could be, so whether it's on the plan or not, it can be, because it's an off sale. It can be drunk anywhere you decide. When you buy your alcohol from Sainsbury's, anywhere you want to drink it. If you're allowed to drink it, you can drink it in my front garden if I allow you to. But if I say I don't want you in my front garden, then you can't.
Yeah, you don't want that. Okay.
I think what would probably would be best is if Mr. Sewell can complete his application presentation. And then if there are specific questions, we can raise those once he's completed, because I'm sure some of the questions which you may well have could well be addressed as he goes through his speech. But if it's a quick one.
That's fine and well, but this isn't Sainsbury's, this is Frensham, it's a rural community, and people taking beer down to the local footbridge where I live.
I think, can we not pursue this one further? Because I think Mr. Hughes has fully covered that already in his response.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I simply amplify the words of your licensed officer. Just by way of summary, under the Licensing Act 2003, unlike the previous act, the consumption of alcohol is not a licensed activity. It's the sale that's licensed. It is part of any plan that you are required to identify where the sales will take place, therefore the red line on the plan you see before you. And it should be indicated where, if there's an associated area for external consumption, that it can be indicated on the plan. And I would suggest it is. It tells you where people may sit. And if you look at the box out, you can see the black line that surrounds the area with the words, bear with me, I'll just read those, my eyes aren't good enough. Yes, the tap room, there's a black line around there. That's indicative of where people may consume, if they're to be consuming as part of off sales directly from this premises, but as has been identified, this is a tap room to a brewery. People will be able to buy alcohol just as they can in any supermarket. And I would be surprised if there aren't supermarkets in Frensham. And I would expect that they will be able to buy and drink wherever they wish, just as they are free to. One thing I would, if I could expand on it, expand on the point would be, it is open to you, the members, to add conditions to any premises license, and those conditions are required to be appropriate. If you have a concern that, for example, the consumption of alcohol would be undesirable in the grain barn, I simply note that as it's there indicated on the plan. You could add a condition stating that alcohol sold for by way of off sale shall not be sold for persons for consumption within the grain barn. If you felt that that was undesirable, it would then place a burden on the premises license holder to ensure when they're selling to people, they would indicate you must not consume this in the grain barn. I hope that's of some utility to you, sir. Just moving back then to my submissions, which, as I say, I'm hoping will be limited. One thing that cannot be denied here, it's part of the public licensing register maintained by the local authority, is that this is a previously licensed premises. It's a premises that had an off-sales license. It's a premises that operated as a microbrewery with taproom. And it appears, simply from the licensed history, that it did so without impacting negatively on the licensing objectives. And I say that because 3 years ago, and your officers will be able to confirm this, it's simply part of your records, there was an application made by the licensee at the time to extend the hours, and to extend the hours to a considerable hour, terminal hours of 1:30 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays for live music and the supply of alcohol, also recorded music to 1:30. That application was ultimately successful, having been considered by the responsible authorities, who would have included your environmental health officer, an expert on noise nuisance. The fact that this premises was able to operate successfully to promote the licensing objectives identifies that this location is indeed suitable to be a microbrewery and taproom. And we would suggest what's being applied for here is to license a microbrewery and taproom by an experienced operator. And therefore, I don't want to labor that point, although I would like to now deal specifically with the 4 licensing objectives, just by way of summary. But just bear with me. Sorry. In terms of the 4 licensing objectives, I'm just going to look for some key points here, because you may have specific questions later, sir. The protection of children from harm, something that concerns all of us whenever we look at any licensed premises. I'm going to ask Dave. You operate premises already.
Yep.
What's effectively your track record, and what's your system for ensuring, for example, there are no underage sales at your premises?
We operate in both my premises a Challenge 25 scheme.
Could you explain to the members how that works?
Basically, anyone who comes in who looks under 25, we ask them to show appropriate identification to prove that they are over 25. That being said, both of my premises, which I've had for almost 20 years, one of them, they're both in residential areas, and they're the sort of premises I would go to if I wasn't working, my sort of age group, so we don't generally get too many younger people in. That being said, they're both family-friendly venues. A lot of parents come in for food and for drink with their children on Saturday, Sunday afternoon and enjoy a family day out.
Thank you. Then again, looking at the prevention of crime and disorder. Now, the prevention of crime and disorder is there to ensure that it's not just any crime and disorder that may take place on the premises. It's what impact a premises may have on the surrounding area in terms of crime and disorder. Now, again, can you just explain? You mentioned your current premises near families. What is the setting of your current premises, and what steps do you take to make sure that you're not impacting on your neighbours in terms of crime and disorder there?
Both my premises in heavily dense residential areas. You know, my customers are local residents. That's basically 90% of the customers who visit my premises in London. As I say, they're both, we generally don't have any crime or disorder because they're just nice local people who want to come out and have some refreshment and enjoy, you know, a bit of socializing end of the day. You know, they're just, I operate nice sort of places that you take your, you know, brothers, sisters, nieces and nephews to, or, you know, for a nice afternoon out. I'm not, you know, I'm not a, there's barely any crime and disorder. Neither of my premises have ever had any doorman or security. They're just not that sort of venue. And that's obviously what we're looking to recreate here. It's not what, you know, I'm not looking for a young audience. I'm just looking for walkers, cyclists, people who just want to stop, have a bit of refreshment, hopefully sample my beer, which they'll hopefully enjoy, and then carry on. You know, it's not, it is what it is. It's a farm. There's no residents anywhere near it, really. I think the closest ones live on the farm who are tenants of the farm. The other residents are, I don't know, 400 or 500 meters away. Yeah, people come, walk, have a drink, move on.
Okay, and given what we've just heard from the applicant, I would suggest if we look at the prevention of public nuisance, you've heard about the isolated nature of this specific location, and I would go so far to submit there is limited, if any, risk of public nuisance being caused from this location. It's located within the heart of a farm complex, and you've heard about the distance between the premises itself and the nearest residential neighbours. And again, on that, I would also pray in aid to the previous licensing history, identifying that additional hours for live music and recorded music were successfully applied for. Therefore, that would have been considered. The noise nuisance history of the premises, if any, would have been considered. And that was a successful application 3 years ago. And we would suggest nothing's changed in 3 years to change the proximity of neighbouring residents to this premises, sir. And just for my last point, sir, on the issue of public safety, the last of the licensing objectives, an issue has been made about servicing of these premises by way of the local road network. Dave, if you could just tell us what sort of servicing are you expecting to be required here at the premises?
I think there's two different elements. First element is the brewery itself. We'd probably be looking at getting a delivery of grain once every 2 to 3 weeks by a lorry. I mean, it's a commercial farm, you know, lorries come in and out of there all the time to service the farm and other businesses that are there. In terms of delivering, hopefully beer, which hopefully people will buy from us. We're envisaging delivering that ourselves personally in our cars initially, and we will see. I mean, it is a microbrewery. You know, if we supply 1 or 2 local pubs, that's about the extent of the amount of beer we're going to be supplying. And then the other side is the tap room, and I would envisage probably about 50 to 60% of the people would be either coming on foot or by bicycle. the other 50 potentially % may come in their own vehicles. From the historical side of that venue, when I used to frequent it when it was the previous tenant there, I mean, I used to go down there with my family in the car and, you know, we'd stay for an hour or two and drive home. I only live 4 minutes away, so I'm very, very local. Literally, I'm on Latchwood Lane. It's just up the road. But I don't see there being, you know, any more traffic than there would be normally. I mean, it's accessed by a single track road, sure. There's pictures in the pack with all the passing areas and speed humps. You know, I think people sort of think that we're trying to change what was there before. It's not entirely true. I think there's been a lot of misrepresentation about what we're planning to do there. But I don't see there being any, you know, in terms of traffic. Busy times are going to be probably Saturdays and Sundays, where people drive down in their cars, but just as likely people drive down to the farm to go bird watching, to go fishing. You know, it is a private road end of the day, which is owned by the freeholders of the farm. You know, so, you know, it's a private road. I don't understand why it should be an issue to anyone.
And just on that, when you spoke about servicing, what sort of hours of the day do you expect servicing to actually be taking place?
So mainly in the mornings, Monday to Friday. I mean, if we get a delivery of grain or hops, or Jenny comes working hours and van will drive down, drop it off and drive off again. But it's not, it won't be a day, it's not a daily occurrence either. It's in terms of what we get delivered there will be once or twice a week.
Thank you. And I just add to that, sir, the servicing of the brewery itself. The brewery is not a licensed activity. It's the tap room and the sales of alcohol that are actually the licensed side of things. So to some extent, the servicing of the brewery, limited as it is, isn't of direct impact on the licensing objective so far as this application is concerned. But regardless, we would say it's still limited. It takes place within daytime hours. This is not something that would see large HGVs at 11 p.m. at night moving on the road. And it's a road that successfully services a sizable commercial dairy. And with that, so that's very much the end of the submissions we'd like to make. We would say our application sets out exactly what we want to do. The applicants are here to address any questions and concerns. And in order to move this forward effectively, we would suggest addressing concerns by way of question is probably the most effective way to drill down into exactly what might be on the minds of the members.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. Councillor Ellis, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you firstly for this information. It was very handy for me to be able to look at that in advance of the meeting. I suppose I am minded by the fact that this appears to have operated as a similar sort of service to the community for a number of years. I'm also recognising that there have been no objections from responsible authorities. I suppose one of the issues is there appears to be a limited number of car parking spaces. I'm presuming you've done a business plan based on the previous business. How many cars do you feel are going to be visiting at any one time? I appreciate that this covers a lot of hours, different days of the week, but parking is an issue. And also, I recognise the type of roads in the area, but those roads are probably very similar to those across the whole of the borough. Thank you.
So one thing I would just note, I anticipate it would be accepted. Everybody anticipates peak operating times are likely Saturday and Sunday daytimes, and likely in the summer as well, just due to the nature of the outside seating rather than the restricted size of the tap room. So just with that in mind.
Yeah, well, again, we don't expect to have, there's a precedence how many cars there might be. So I would say in previous years, in peak hours, there might be in total 15, 20 cars. And then there are some parking spaces outside the brewery, and then there are some shared parking spaces around the farm. For example, the other unit that I rent, there's probably parking for 6 or 7 cars outside it. And quite regularly, the customers of the previous brewery use those parking spaces as well. And also behind the grain store, there's quite a large area which is currently used for overflow parking for the Mosaic Education Center, which is on the farm itself. So I don't think there won't be any problems with the parking as a whole on the site.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor?
Not at the moment, thank you.
I don't have any questions myself at the moment. Members from locally. On the left of Mark, on the right of Mark.
Could I kindly ask you to put the drawing back up that was submitted? Thank you. Could I have the higher one that shows the buildings? That one as well, but the one below, please. Yeah, thank you. That's fine, thank you. The drawing submitted from the applicant shows the brewery building, the tap room building, an outside seating area. It does not state the word proposed. One building is correctly listed as the old forge, which is purposely built. The other building is the old bullpen, purposely built. There is not an outside seating area. This area is an uneven mishmash of concrete and earth that was left over from when these buildings were used as a farm. These two buildings were completely empty shells before the applicant signed the lease. And I would point out to the committee that these empty buildings could be of use for any craft business. The drawing of the site plan fails to show 2 houses 30 meters away from the bullpen.
Whereabouts are these houses relation, if you look at the,
Can I pass that forward to you?
oh, they're on the, as I read it, the south side of or what's described as being the cow byre.
The building that's showed as the proposed brewery is actually the old bullpen, and from the wall of that to the 2 houses is approximately 30 meters from those 2 residential houses.
And the issue is?
I thought they would have been shown on the drawing to show that how close the public nuisance could be to these dwellings.
All right, yeah. Yes, in fact, I do see them, although not clearly marked on the Annex 3, which is on page 27 of our papers. But that's,
Yeah, I just didn't want you to feel that these buildings were purposely built as.
right.
Thank you.
Okay. So there is, so you're pointing out there are neighboring houses within a couple of 100 meters. Well, in 40 meters, I think you're saying.
30.
30 meters. Right, point taken.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just to repeat, my name's David Munro. As it happens, I'm the local councillor, make it absolutely clear, but I'm also a local resident of over 30 years standing. I know the area well. I was a very close friend with the previous owner, Mrs. Jo Reeder, who most of us, I think, will know. I'd just like to make four comments, please. Two of them in relation to the submission I've already made. And the two, to my mind, there's two licensing objectives which are seriously impaired by this license. And the first one is public safety. And very concerned about the extremely poor access to this isolated site. It's a single track road, perfectly adequate for a farm. It's got cattle grids along it, for instance, but not at all suitable for the higher volume, which will inevitably be engendered by if this application is successful. There's no point in setting up an entertainment establishment selling alcohol and all the rest of it if nobody comes to it. There must be an expectation of considerably greater traffic there. And some of it will be on foot, I accept that. Most of it, come off it, most of it won't be. This is an isolated area. Apart from very local people, people will come to this venue by car. And surely that's common ground. The road is simply not suitable. I think, especially when people are leaving late at night, it'll be dark. There's no lighting there whatsoever. I think this will set up a very dangerous situation. I would ask you, members of the panel, to consider that very carefully. The second one is prevention of public nuisance. I've mentioned the word isolated several times, as indeed have the applicants. This is an unspoilt part of a very lovely part of the world. It's been a working farm for generations, and it's been in tune with the surrounding countryside and local residents. What is feared, and I think rightly feared, is granting of this license will fundamentally change the nature of the operations there. Wildlife will be affected. How can they not be? The rest of the premises must be by the increasing volume of people there. But I'm particularly sympathetic to local residents. There are a number of properties at the end of this single access road. We're not just talking about when people arrive at the premises, they'll be isolated. It's how do they get there? And they can only get there by a very narrow junction off the Reeds Road, where there are other people. And I know local residents, I'm sure they'll speak for themselves, are very fearful that the fundamental nature of where they have chosen to live will be altered. And I would ask you to take that into account as the general public nuisance, not just at the premises, but in the local area as well. Could I just make two more comments on what I've heard today? I accept that there has been there's history of licenses being approved here. But I would just say I know that they were hotly contested at the time, and yes, a hearing came to the decision that was made. But that's past history. We're now in a new situation here, and the feeling I know talking to friends and residents is that this licensing application, if it's successful, well, as we said before, would change the nature and expand the nature of what is on offer to inevitably quite a number of not just local residents, but people coming from afar. And why shouldn't they come from far? But it's up to the duty, surely, of the licensing authority to make sure that that impact is proportionate and minimized. And the last point I'd like to make is I know and accept that Waverley Borough Council does not have a policy of cumulative impact. That's a fact. It is coming up for review in July, apparently, and who knows, it may well, but as we speak, it does not. But I am told, perhaps officers would advise on this, that you are allowed to take the likely cumulative impact into account. And although this is a peaceful rural area, there are in fact quite a number of premises, both licensed and non-licensed, within the area. There's a garden centre within half a mile. There's a rural life centre, which is a similar distance. There are pubs in all the neighbouring villages. There's a lot of entertainment venues already in that area, and this would, this is not a blank sheet of paper here. This would add significantly to a number of licensed premises, and clearly there would be an effect on the trade of everything around there. So I would ask you, in conclusion, members, to take that into account very seriously as well. I'm sure all the things I've said will be expanded from people with greater detailed knowledge than myself, but that's a starter anyway for the serious concerns that local residents, and I include myself in this, have if this application is granted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I think your concerns to a certain extent have already been answered by the applicants, but if I can just hold fire, please. Question at the back.
Yes, thank you. My name's Paul Murray, and I actually live in Keeper's Cottage, which is historically part of Pierpont Farm. My family's been in the same cottage for over 50 years. I've lived there 27 years. So, I'm probably a real local, not someone who comes from Farnham or miles away, and actually live, I think, within 270 metres rather than the 400, as one of the gents over there said. Now, from this proposed site, I mean, it's pretty much, it's a clear line of sight over flat meadowland and across the south branch of the River Wey. And the way the land works, it's flat, then either side, it's high banking around the side of me. So it basically acts like an acoustic bowl. So anyone sort of even walking across the footbridge, I did actually send a photo from Google Earth. I don't know if you got to look at it, about where I lived and the direct line of sight. But I mean, I can hear people chatting as they walk along the footbridge. Now, when the brewery is open, it does bring down an awful lot of people past me. Sat-navs quite often send cars down that way. And I've had a number of instances where people, it's that narrow, I'm the only vehicle that can get down there before it narrows right into a bridleway, just turning around and then breaking my gate, breaking locks and stuff like that. And again, you get the hooligan element of people on motorbikes and quad bikes just coming through. And again, alcohol and mountain bikes, they don't mix. I got hit by a mountain bike a few years back, had a number of ribs broken. I can't say it was the brewery's fault, but it just doesn't go, alcohol and mountain biking. And it's all right saying, oh, there'd be no crime or public disorder, but you can put as much CCTV in the brewery as you like, but it's not going to make any difference once you walk out of it. The police presence where we live is just non-existent. think even the police call it the Wild West. They never come out. They don't investigate. And it's fine and well saying, oh, you don't have problems where you have your other pubs. But where are they? Are they in London, where you've got like a policeman in every corner? Our response time is awful. You know, I was surrounded by a group a couple of years back threatening to do all sorts to me. I was on the phone at 99 and they just said, walk away. Well, I couldn't. And I think 5 hours later, the police turned up. I was really in fear of my life. So these arguments don't work, I'm afraid. You know, it's a working farm. They're saying children are safe. How can they be safe if it's a working farm? And parents take their eye off the ball. I've had children coming down past me, playing in the river, trespassing. Parents setting up rope swings for their children while they go back and drink beer. It just doesn't work, I'm sorry.
Thank you, point taken. Mr. Sewell, would you like to answer both those questions, which are concerns which are raised around safety, public safety, both on the usage of the premises and of the track as it's described leading up to the farm? Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. If I could just pick up those points that were raised, I just have several notes. One of the representatives stated that the buildings were in some way sort of empty and unusable and could be used by any craft business. The two buildings that are to be licensed were a brewery and a tap room. When the old tenant left, they took out the brewing equipment. That was it. We've moved our own brewing equipment in. So no other works have been done to them other to just install the new brewery equipment in place of the old brewery equipment. As to this, the comment that there is no external seating area, it's a mishmash of various different types of flooring. It's still the area where we'll be placing tables and chairs. It is the outside seating area, if that gives any clarity there, sir. In terms of the two houses that are within 30 meters, you can see them on the plan, although they're not marked, but they're on that box out plan on the image that you see in front of you. They're both owned by, effectively by the farm under the trust, and tenanted, one's tenanted by the farmer themselves. They haven't objected to this application. The other one's tenanted by the local blacksmith who works just to the north. He has not objected to this application, sir. I'm just trying to move on quickly, sir. We heard from Councillor Munro. Councillor Munro was an outspoken supporter of the previous operation. And we heard that the road itself there may be acceptable for the farm, but not for a brewery tap. Well, it was a brewery and a brewery tap previously. And there's no history of public safety being jeopardized by that operation, sir. And again, for this application, given that there is a good standing history of this style of operation at this location, your public safety team are consultees on this application and they have raised no representation and they are the council's experts on such things. So, and we'd say that makes sense because a similar operation existed for many years, well, 5 years. There was also a note from Councillor Munro that this will be a fundamental change in the nature of both the operation and the area as a result of that change. If I could just ask the applicant, previously there was a brewery with a tap room on site. Can I just, what is your intention of the operation that will be on site under your management?
It's to be a microbrewery and tap room, just as it was.
I'm hoping that just clears that up, sir. And my only issue on cumulative impact, and I do have to address you on cumulative impact as it's been raised. The principles of cumulative impact are based on the idea that regardless of how well a premises may be, it may simply be the case that there are so many licensed premises in one area that resources are in short supply. classically an absence of, for example, taxis that may take people home. Additional licensed activity in a particular area could cause issues as people then effectively vie for that limited resource. That creates an area of cumulative impact, and that allows local authorities to make decisions based on that. So we would suggest, for one thing, if there are a number of pubs nearby and other licensed premises, then relicensing a previously licensed brewery tap is highly unlikely to result in a fundamental change in the nature of the area. This is not a clean sheet of paper that's never seen licensed activity. Rather, there is existing licensed activity, and there was previously licensed activity at this site. We would also note that this is a licensed activity that is, by its nature, likely to attract people with peak attendance during the daytime on weekends. That's unlike most destination pubs, for example, where peak attendance is often in the later hours. So I would suggest, therefore, that cumulative impact, if it is to be considered, is not something that should concern the members on this particular matter. And in terms of the issues, again, of noise nuisance that have been raised, it's not a premises that, when operating previously, led to an abundance of noise complaints being lodged with this council that would have seen your environmental health officer making a representation in this application. And again, it's a site where 3 years ago, this local authority identified it could trade up until 1:30 in the morning. And the authority was content that such an operation was capable of taking place without creating notable public nuisance. And again, I would suggest the locale has not changed.
Hi, I'm Jay Shern. I'm a Tilford Parish Councillor, but I'm here in role as a resident. I live along the Reeds Road. Just to point out that my understanding is that Craft Brews, who are the previous residents of the tap room, they advertised their hours as 3 days a week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That was it. That's the hours they operated. Between Friday between 11 and 8, Saturday between 11 and 9, and Sunday between 11 and 7. Obviously, those are guidelines, but they were literally 3 days a week with shortened hours. In this application, I was a bit unclear. It says the application states that the sale of alcohol will be from midday till 7 or 8 in the evening. But then in the detail, it's 7 days a week, Monday to Thursday, 12 till 11, Friday and Saturday, 12 till midnight, and then Sunday, 12 till 10:30. That's the sale of alcohol, with the occasional hours that they state. The hours of the opening of the premises, they say from 12 till 7 or 8, 7 days a week. However, in the detail, again, the hours are different to the 12 till 7 or 8 in the evening. So I just needed clarification on what they actually were applying for.
So I would suggest, as a combination of the application documents you have and the additional documents that came through, the hours are set out. I would suggest, for the interest of clarity, the hours applied for are detailed at page 19 of the committee papers. And in very simple terms, they're midday until 11 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays. They are midday to midnight, Fridays and Saturdays, and midday to 10:30 p.m. on Sundays. Those are the hours in which licensed activity, that being the sale of alcohol, can take place. With that would also come the ability to have regulated entertainment, record music, live music. So you have heard, or you will have seen in the licensing support bundle we've put in, by its nature, this is not a premises that's likely to be particularly busy at midnight on a Friday. Certainly not in the middle of winter, because there's not much room inside. The peak hours The hours where this premises could have the most impact are Saturdays and Sundays during the afternoons, the peak time in which this area of the countryside is occupied by people who may then frequent the premises or may be drawn to it. As you will note, the previous applicant in their application for later hours observed that they were applying for those late hours specifically for events or meetings of societies and so on. And we would suggest that's exactly the same business we would be looking for in any of those later hours in the day. You're not going to have the odd rambler coming past at 11 o'clock, 11 p.m. on a Friday or a Saturday, but you might have a local socializing group looking to book the premises for that period. We're not looking to go as late as the previous occupier, but it's that same concept. The peak hours that will be operated by the brewery tap are likely to terminate at, and ask the applicant here.
We envisage mainly being open 5 days a week. We'd like to be 5 days a week, Wednesday through to Sunday, mainly from 12 o'clock till 5, 6, 7, till the sun goes down, and that's it basically. There's been some misinformation, I think, out there about what we intend the business to be. We intend the business to be exactly pretty much how the old business was that occupied it for the last 5 years. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of public misinformation about what we intend the site to become. We intend it to stay as it is. We intend it to be a brewery primarily, and we want people to buy and taste our beer that we're passionate about brewing. Yes, if Mr. Smith would like his 50th birthday party there on a Friday evening, and yes, of course we can stay open until 11 or 12 for you. But on a normal Friday evening or Saturday evening, I want to be at home having dinner with my wife at 8:30 p.m. to be quite honest.
Just to follow up, what I was trying to get at is the massive difference between what was there 3 days a week and what they're planning 7 days a week.
Well, I think one of the things with which always surprised me with the licensing applications is the applicant will apply for what looks like to me to be unrealistic long hours, but that's more of a safeguard, as I've discovered, in order to having to avoid for a special license for an extended time. So I think in my experience, it's not unreasonable to see those hours being applied for, but not necessarily utilized. And I think Mr. Benham has been trying to provide what he thinks in terms of his operation will be the normal hours. But there's no guarantee that he will keep those. But as there was no guarantee that the previous applicant would not be having parties at 1:30 in the morning. It's just one of those things with licensing. People will apply for what they, at the widest amount they can get a license for, but not necessarily utilize the hours which they've been given.
Yeah. Can I just say, you mentioned that there weren't any previous complaints about the previous tenant. There have been complaints. We spoke to the previous occupier and we said, you know what, you did a party, it was really, well, it wasn't even particularly late, but it was intrusive, and he stopped doing them. So when you say there haven't been issues, there were issues, but they were addressed without having to go through Waverley Borough.
Thank you for that.
And we have, and you had a relationship and you could trust him, and he stopped doing it.
Okay, thank you.
So there has been complaints.
Yeah, but none registered, as you said. Mr. Munro, Councillor Munro.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. I think my assertion that this represents a fundamental change has been challenged. Well, that's fine, but we've just heard, I think, that there is going to be a fundamental change. The current proposed applicant has said that he does not expect to open beyond the mid-evening. I think you said 8:30 or before. Well, you know, we've got to look at the application as it stands, and I've got it in front of me. The application is for 7 days during the week to close at 2300 hours, and during at weekends, Friday to Sunday, Friday and Saturday at midnight, and Sunday at 10:30. Now it's written down there. You know, there is a fundamental change which, if this license is granted as per the application, then it leaves the door open to change. I mean, you just can't get away from that, I'm afraid. Could I say, I hope, obviously, that you're minded not to agree this license. But if you are minded, then I hope that you look very seriously at conditioning, so that the applicant's statement, a very welcome statement, is actually made legally enforceable by reducing the number of opening hours in the application.
Thank you.
Through you, Chairman, please. Just to let you know, Councillor Munro, that the previous applicant's licence was for 7 days as well. Okay, page 29.
My point is, we know that, in fact, for the good reasons, Chairman, that you've have already stated, that they didn't actually take up those opening hours, but the granting of a fresh license here leaves the possibility open. How can it not, if it's granted? If you grant it to allow on Friday and Saturday for the applicant to open the premises until midnight, then that's legally enforceable. So why not condition what is proposed to what is legally possible? It didn't happen last time. That's a shame, I think. But let's put it right this time.
Thank you for that comment. Councillor Merriweather, I think, did you have your hand up?
I did, and I'd just like to emphasise that I'm here as a resident. I am not here as a councillor. I just wanted to come back on the point about car parking. Reference was made earlier on to all of the car parking spaces that there are down on this site. These car parking spaces that are there are allocated for the other businesses that operate on the site. And some of the car parking spaces that were mentioned earlier on actually belong to the private spaces that belong to the French and fly fishers. So it would be a shame if the applicant is hoping to use car parking spaces that are not intended to be used for his site. And we know, we've also seen in the past, the owners of the site have invited visitors to park in places that they don't even own. Because there's not enough capacity on the site to accommodate what is already going on there. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
And next door.
I've prepared a small statement. Thank you for letting me speak. I am probably one of the most affected residents if this license is granted that can actually speak. The houses right next door to the proposed brewery tap room are tenants of the farm. So that says everything. They're not able to object. I'm objecting on the grounds of prevention of public nuisance and protection of children from harm. In the licence conditions set out for this application, they have stated that they will hold private events which will require late openings. This is disproportionate and unreasonable and would completely be unacceptable to us based on the facts. Public nuisance. Every vehicle visiting this proposed business brewery has to stop outside our front door to access the main Reeds Road at the T-junction. This junction has a restricted view, so all vehicles have to stop. This is a fact. We have been woken up on many occasions from the last business that was operating as a microbrewery. We have had people walking up from the previous business, waiting outside our front gate for friends or taxis to pick them up. We've even spoken to them and asked them to be quiet. We have taxis waiting outside the front gate late at night We have been woken up with them on their phones trying to speak to their fares with not much luck, as there is very limited mobile signal at the farm. Late spring, summer, early autumn, we like to sleep with our windows open. This is an extremely peaceful area. I hope you've had a chance, committee, to see the video I have sent you showing this area on a Saturday evening. This situation was so bad previously that I would have to go and close my daughter's bedroom window after she'd fallen asleep and put a fan in her room, so she was not woken up repeatedly at weekends. The situation became unbearable. It affected all of our well-being, and as stated in the Waverley licensing policy, Article 8, every person has a right to respect for his home and private family life. And Article 1, every person is entitled to a peaceful enjoyment of his and hers possessions. These are not possible due to the public nuisance from this business, if the license is granted. We also have a problem with all the vehicles turning into the track leading to the proposed brewery and leaving the proposed brewery. The headlights shine directly into our living rooms and bedrooms. This is an unacceptable public nuisance. The fact that it has previously disturbed my wife and I and our children's sleep, we feel is harmful to them. We all have the right to a good night's sleep in our own home, as I've done for the last 21 years living here. There is no way that the licensing policy point 852, prevention of disturbance of patrons or customers leaving or arriving at these premises, can ever be achieved at this site due to the location. After we endured countless sleep interruptions over many weekends, I went and spoke to the owner of the previous microbrewery. I sat down and explained all the problems that his late opening hours were causing to my family and myself, and I explained how long this had been going on for. He saw how upset this public nuisance had caused us. He was not aware that this had happened. He profusely apologized and was upset at the impact it had on us. From that time onwards, he closed at 8 p.m. and held no more parties. He has also informed me that he received complaints from the direct neighbours previously, and Environmental Health had received a written complaint. May I also state that the last microbrewery was only open 3 days a week, as stated on their website, as you've heard. This will not be the case if you grant a licence to the Farnham Brewing Company. They have publicly stated they plan to transform the new brewery into a 7-day-a-week pub or bar with events or private parties serving alcohol till 11 p.m. This will mean staff passing our house up till midnight. This is totally unacceptable to our household and to our neighbours. May I also point out in 2016, one of the Waverley officers refused permission for the existing businesses, which are next to the proposed brewery, to open after 8 p.m. or Sundays or bank holidays. The officer's comments said this would result in detrimental harm to the neighbouring occupants. If for some reason you grant this application, you will destroy the peace and quiet to myself, my family and my neighbours. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that. 2 more questions. I think we need to soon wrap up. Otherwise, we're going to be in danger of probably repeating ourselves. Lady in front of me.
Thank you. Excuse me. I live along the track that we've been discussing and have done so for about 15 years. I just wanted to make a few comments about the previous brewing company and why the residents had not objected to his first premises license application when he started the business. Prior to then, there'd been another brewery, Frensham Brewery, which was a very low key, run by a husband and wife team. They opened probably once a week, selling beer to local people, and mainly sold their beer to local pubs. And I think we perhaps naively expected that to continue when they sold the business to craft brews. So therefore, we didn't object to their premises license, expecting the same sort of setup. Craft Brews then developed their business, and my husband and I, we were customers of theirs. We used to go down there and enjoy an early evening drink there. But then they started to take, they were inundated with requests for late night parties, and they held late night parties, and we could hear them from our bedroom. And they disturbed us during those evenings. And then, as Michael Lambkin has said, he made a complaint to Craft Brews, and they decided to change their operating hours, and they stopped holding parties. They did hold one party probably a year or so ago for a local person, but then they kept the hours of that limited. We will be affected by noise of people leaving the premises and coming along the track to go home, from cars and people potentially walking home if they've been drinking, particularly during the summer when our windows are open. I looked at the Section 182 guidance on the Licensing Act, which suggested that licensing authorities might wish to encourage cooperation between the applicant and local residents. I think that would have been helpful if the applicant had engaged with us local residents, and they know who we are. We could have had a conversation. We could have perhaps avoided this hearing today. And I appreciate what you're saying about the applicant has to apply for long hours. But if they're not going to operate for those such long hours, had they restricted their hours in their application, it might have avoided the dispute between neighbours. Obviously, we are concerned. We don't want them operating till midnight or 1 a.m. and how that's going to affect our night and our sleep and our enjoyment of our homes. The applicant has publicly said in the Farnham Herald that he intends to run it as a gastro pub 7 days a week, which is of a concern to us. I also want to just to say, in response to the applicant's licensing advisor, that I have come across people drinking in the woods in the farm who've bought beer from Craft Brews. There is the farm, and in conjunction with the Countryside Regeneration Trust, which own the prop for the farm, have a children's learning area, and there are wooden seats there. I've come across people sitting there drinking. I've come across cyclists who've picked up beer. They've stopped on their bikes. They're also drinking in the same area. In response to the applicant's submission about there are no speed humps going down this single track. Sorry, there's one, sorry, my husband corrects me. There is one going into the farm just before you get to the cattle grid, but apart from that, there are no other speed humps. There's no fishing rights on the river except for the French and fly fishermen or fisher ladies. And in response to the point about there's been no objection from the tenant farmer and the other tenant, the tenant farmer has been given notice to leave the farm next year, so he's probably not in the right position to make an objection. And similarly for the other tenant, as Mr. Lambkin suggests, it's a difficult position for him to object to this, bearing in mind his letting position. I also just want to make a quick few statements, if I may, on behalf of the chairman of the East Millbridge Sustainable Development Association. This is an association in Frensham that was established to work with with Waverley and developers to try and encourage sustainable development in the Frensham area. And Mr. Glenn Plant has submitted a very detailed submission addressing the application. One point about the public nuisance, the brewery isn't just, as people have said, isn't just the 2 units and that outside area. There is the public nuisance when people are leaving the premises. And so I don't think we can just look at the premises and construe them narrowly, because it has a bigger effect. I also want to just mention the supporting representations, of which there were several. Most do not address the statutory licensing objectives, and only one addresses planning and conditions. The vast majority of the objectors have addressed some or all of the licensing objectives. And on behalf of the association, they would ask the committee to please place stringent conditions on any off-license sales to avoid the farm becoming a potential drinking den. Thank you.
I think really we must have one more question. You, sir, have already spoken. Can I?
Hi, I could be very quick. My name is John Davis and I'm part of Frensham. I'm a Frensham parish councillor. On page 14 of this document, you've got here Frensham Council, no objection, we do object. So there's a misprint in this document. We do object to this licensing.
I hadn't realised.
Thank you.
Yeah, we really do need to wrap up. If you, I'll come back to you, sir, second.
You know, is to try and understand the scale of this. I own the Hollybush in Frensham, which has taken 10 years to get to a point where it can hold its own. And one of the things I'm trying to get to is scope. And the reason I was asking about outdoors is, and if I may use your document where you quote RD7, which I know this isn't about planning, but you stop your G, point G under RD7 says satisfactory vehicle access can be achieved. That's the last point G, but you've missed out the bit where it follows on and says, in addition to the above criteria, proposals for the reuse and amplification of rural buildings in Greenbelt will be expected to be capable of satisfactory and complete implementation within the footprint of the mass of the original building. Any associated uses of the land adjoining the building will be carefully scrutinized and resisted if they conflict with the proposals of Greenbelt. And that was the point that I'm trying to get to. The previous tenant used outside the building. There is no permission. There is the operation, craft brewery, has to take place within the envelope of the building under RD7, but that's missing from your document. Sorry? I'm referring to your document, BDL 018.
I do fear that we're moving into the problems of planning. The license is purely for the operation of the sale of alcohol. It's nothing to do with the bits on the buildings on the side.
But how many, if you grant a takeaway license and the whole site gets used, is it 100 people?
That's not our issue.
Okay. Anyway, can I just note that that part is missing?
There will be a planning application subsequently, I believe.
Yeah.
And then you have lots of opportunity to comment on that.
Thank you.
Sir, in the middle.
Thank you. So we live right next door to the farm. We've lived here for 15 years and we moved here because it's a very quiet rural area, as I'm sure most residents chose to live for its quietness. I think it's very difficult to get into, it's very difficult to separate out the various components of licensing, planning, et cetera, The reality, the pragmatic situation is that 15 years ago, it was a very quiet rural farm. There were no commercial entities there. The farm has developed 10 or so small businesses within the farm. It's proposing to develop another 10 more. And then there is the brewery. So if you look from where things were 15 years ago to where they will be potentially in a year or two's time, that is a very different situation to what people expected when they bought their houses and moved to that area. And while I'm very supportive of the Countryside Regeneration Trust and their objectives and the chief executive sitting over there, that needs to be borne in mind with the environment in terms of things like light pollution, noise pollution. The area is AONB, triple SI. Surrey has a dark skies policy, and developing more and more business, particularly ones that are operating late in the evening, will have a significant environmental and ecological impact, which is a concern to me as an environmentalist, us as local residents, and surely to the CRT as well.
Thank you. The very last point, please, if I may.
With regard to the previous application, I didn't object because I didn't know it was going through. I knew it was a microbrewery, and then all of a sudden it morphed into this noise venue. I have made complaints. I made complaints to the police, the local council. I spoke to a Jim Rees at the CRT, Robin Page, and eventually I had a serious chat with Joe Woods, the brewer, who was very apologetic. And from then the noise stopped and he started closing early. I'm not saying I made him do that, but he didn't realise the disturbance and how far the noise travelled.
Thank you.
I don't think these people will. Mr. Smith having his fictitious 70th birthday on a Saturday night, it's not good.
Thank you. I'm going to close the questions, if I may. Mr. Sewell, if you'd like to wrap up from your side.
Thank you, sir. If I could just raise an issue about the document that can be found at BDL 018, the document that was being referred to earlier by the representative. This document is a grant of planning permission. It's not one of our submissions. It is a document we've exhibited. It is the grant of planning permission.
Right.
The site granted in 2016. All I would simply note is that on BDL 0.18, for what impact the planning grant is, it identifies that, as it states, the access served the existing microbrewery site. Having regard to this, the existing vehicular access is considered to be satisfactory. I would, however, say those were the thoughts of the planning authority, not the licensing authority. And although it doesn't exist in a vacuum, it is for you, the members, to decide on access and whether or not the licensing objectives would be impacted upon by what is proposed here, sir. I would like to clear up just one other issue. No one from this applicant team, no one to do with the application, has ever marketed this as a gastro pub, or that they wish to transform the site into a gastro pub. A local newspaper did indeed speak with one of the applicants, and the applicant stated he would like to offer good food eventually. I would note there's no kitchen on site, sir. He said he would like to offer good food eventually. The reporter appears to have decided to wax lyrical and identify that it's going to be converted into a gastro pub. As you have heard from the applicant on numerous occasions, it's a brewery. It is a micro craft brewery with a brewery tap. And rather than mop up everything else, sir, I just look to one issue, which is it was observed by you, sir, that applicants apply for all the hours they may possibly need. Those don't necessarily mean the hours that will be their peak trade, or even the hours they will ultimately be able to trade. By the very nature of this as being a relatively small tap room, it's going to rely on having some people outside at tables and chairs for its peak summer business. It is unlikely it's going to see a great deal of trade at 11 o'clock on a Saturday. However, there may be some, and I would quote the previous operator who was looking to go to 1:30 when they mentioned parties, anniversaries, wedding celebrations. What I would, however, sir, add to that, sir, is that application included the playing of recorded and live music. There is no application here before you for recorded and live music, and certainly not to that extent. Under the deregulation of live music, live and recorded music could be played on the premises up until 11 p.m. in the evenings. But I would also remind everybody that on the premises means within the small tap room or in the brewery itself, which would be difficult. It's filled with brewing equipment. If such things are of concern, then the correct way to deal with that is not by restricting hours, I would submit. It's through appropriate conditions, as I mentioned at the beginning. And so I am having just discussed it with the applicant, I would, and this is for your legal officer to potentially advise on, a condition along the lines of this license shall not be used as a permission for licensable activities after 9 p.m. daily, save for the holding of pre-booked events, where, and then as a subset to that condition, where such pre-booked events take place, transport to and from the premises is to be agreed beforehand by the premises license holder. And just bear with me one moment, sir. I'm just going to take some further instructions. From 30 minutes before the end of such event to the time the last customer leaves the area, a member of staff shall be stationed at the junction of the private road where you heard the residents experience concern if their taxis end up waiting there. We don't understand why they would wait there. There's no gate. They can just drive straight down and pick people up. But we'll have a member of staff stood there to point people in the correct direction and ask them not to dwell.
Well, thank you for that proposal. I think we just can't carry on with more questions or criticisms of the applicant. What I should like to do now, if panel member has no questions, to retire, and we'd like to review what we need use before we do.
Yes, just to clarify with the applicant, on your premises plan, you're only expecting the tap room and the brewery to be on the plan of the premises.
Yes, sir, as is detailed. Yes,
It's just that you've got the whole farm on the right. I'm presuming that was for just to show where it's located.
Indeed,
It won't
yes.
form part of the premises.
That also aids in identifying where, for example, the tables and chairs area may be, as is
Thanks,
indicated on
you
the
brought the live music up. I just wanted to clarify. It's
Okay,
just
sir.
those.
We've signed the lease, those two.
So that will be your premises plan. Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify it. So yeah, no, it's just it was the live music was brought up. So
Mr. Hughes, just before we do retire, Councillor has got a question for you.
Thank you. I apologise. This is a very small point, but sometimes these things come back to haunt us. So could I ask you, Mr. Hughes, to establish exactly the correct spelling of the name of the farm? If you look at, Annex 3, on Annex 3, it shows two different spellings, and this has been pointed out by a number of people. So could I please just ask that we make sure?
I believe it's Pierpont, the
Pont,
P-O-N-T, but I'd be corrected by the locals. Yeah, it's just where some people have written it in one way and some of others. but
So
I
it's
think
without the second I.
so on the license, it will be Pont.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you could give us a short while we consider all that we have heard. And there has been much to Thank you all for being so patient, and doubly patient since we didn't have all the documents at the beginning. And I appreciate you all sitting quietly. It's been a lengthy discussion, and it's given us much thought. But we've come down into the conclusion that the licensing application will be granted. But I believe it would be sensible to apply a limited additional conditions proposed by Mr. Sewell along the lines that no licensable activities beyond 9 p.m. will be permitted unless it is a pre-booked event with a transport plan to manage the exit of the patrons from the site. I think the final wordings of that, I've been not legalistic in my interpretation of what that should be, but I believe the legal guys can get their heads together around that. That should be quite sensible. We were very much listening to the concerns raised by residents around Frensham and Tilford and around the site. But I think we need to recognize also, you need to recognize that there are mechanisms in place to address operational issues from local public houses or other licensable sites. And if they do emerge, please do raise them directly with the council. It is quite easy to apply for the licensing authority to apply further restrictions, or indeed to completely remove the license if it is operating inappropriately for the local community. The ball is with you if there is concern, as it is indeed with the license holder, to make sure that he is satisfying the local community's concerns. I leave it up to both of you parties to ensure that it is a smooth and successful operation which doesn't adversely affect the neighborhood. If that's an event, I would like to close the meeting, and thank you very much again for all your time and for your patience.